I'm going to do two problems here. A sine of 22.5 degrees, where we're going to use the half angle identities in degrees, and tan of 7 pi over 8, which is in radians. I'm going to use both formulas on this one. And I'm going to show you why formula 11 in your textbook is better than 10C. 10C I'm going to do first, then I'm going to do 11. Okay, so the first one we're going to do is sine of 22.5. Now, we know that this angle, 22.5 degrees, is not on your unit chart. But now we know the half angle formula. So my half angle formula is theta over 2, which equals, in this case we already know we're in quadrant 1, so I'm going to do the positive 1 minus cosine of theta over 2. Now, since I'm using this formula, what would my theta be? So all you're going to do is take your 2 times 22.5, and that is 45 degrees. So basically you're writing this as sine of 45 over 2. Now that means our theta is 45 degrees. That is on your unit circle, and you can complete the find the value. So we 1 minus cosine of 45 degrees over 2, which equals square root of 1 minus root 2 over 2 divided by 2, which equals, I'm going to go up in here, which equals square root of 2 over 2 minus root 2 over 2 all over 2, which gives you the square root of 2 minus root 2 over 2 divided by 2. Now in this case, we're going to do just multiply these two numbers here, and we get the square root of 2 minus root 2 over 4. And if you break this down, this gives you square root of 2 minus root 2 all over 2. And that is your final answer. And it's as easy as that. It's the algebra here you have to be a little careful with. Okay. Now we're going to do tangent of 7 pi over 8. We're first going to use the hard formula, and then we're going to use the easy formula. So the hard formula is tan of theta over 2 equals plus or minus, and this is plus or minus square root of 1 minus cosine of alpha over 1 plus cosine of alpha. Now, I'm going to write this as tan of 7 pi over 4 divided by 2. And the main reason I did that is because when you divide these two here, you just multiply these two, the 2 and the 4, and you get 8. So my angle, my theta, is 7 pi over 4, which happens to be in quadrant, it happens to be in quadrant 4. So, since we're in quadrant 4, tangent is negative in quadrant 4. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the negative of this formula. Okay? Now this is where you're going to be counted off on a quiz. You have to keep your signs right. You have to know what quadrant you're in, and that tan of theta is negative. So we just plug it in, and we're going to have equals negative square root of 1 minus cosine of 7 pi over 4 over 1 plus cosine of 7 pi over 4, which equals negative square root of 1 minus root 2 over 2 over 1 plus root 2 over 2. I'm going to simplify this a little. I'm going to get square root of 2 minus root 2 over 2 all over 2 plus root 2 over 2. Now what happens here is these two cancel. You can already see where this formula is quite complicated. Okay, so now for the next page, we're going to get square root, let me write it again, of 2 minus root 2 over 2 plus root 2. I'm going to rationalize the denominator by multiplying by the conjugate, which for the denominator, because I have a radical right here. So I'm going to multiply this by 2 minus root 2, and if I multiply this by the conjugate in the denominator, I also have to multiply it in the numerator. Now, I'm going to clean this up, and at the top we have 2 minus root 2 squared, because I have two of these, 1, 2. The denominator is just going to yield 2, because this is going to be 4 minus 2. So we're going to get, I'm going to write it again, 2 minus root 2 squared over 2. Now, if I simplify this, I'm going to write this, I'm going to start back over here. So I'm going to go back over here on this side. I'm going to put the radical here, 2 minus root 2 squared over square root of 2. And that's going to yield me 2, because this cancels here. So we're going to get 2 minus root 2 over root 2. We have to rationalize this again. Let's see. Let me change colors here. Let me use brown. So I'm going to rationalize this and multiply this by root 2 over root 2. And we're going to get 2 root 2 minus 2 over 2. And I've also forgot to keep putting my negative here. This is all negative. You cancel out the 2's. You're going to get negative root 2 minus 1, which is the same as saying 1 plus root, or 1 minus root 2. Because this over here, this right here, would be negative root 2 plus 1. I just rewrote it to look like that. Alright, that's the hard way. Now I'm going to show you why using Formula 11 is much better. So Formula 11 is we're just going to use, we have tan, let's start again, remind us where we're at, tan 7 pi over 8, and we know that tan of theta over 2, which is going to be 7 pi over 4, divided by 2, equals 1 minus cosine 7 pi over 4 over sine of 7 pi over 4. Now, we already know that this is going to be 1 minus root 2 over 2 divided by a negative root 2 over 2, which equals 2 minus root 2 over 2 divided by negative root 2 over 2. They cancel. You rationalize the denominator. I'm going to go ahead and pull the negative out from that denominator. 2 minus root 2 over root 2. Rationalize it like we did on the other page. We're going to get 2 root 2 minus 2 over 2 negative. It's in the front. Cancel out the 2's here. So this would be 1. This would be 1. So you get negative root 2 plus 1, or 1 minus root 2, which is a better way to write it. Okay, so simpler formula here. So you always want to use that formula 11.